Just a few weeks ago. I sat in a Friday afternoon, I'm not going to tell you where, I sat in a Friday afternoon meeting with Chuck Marsh and Susan McCarthy, and we were talking about history and change. And actually, I'm not sure which came first, change or history, but it was really a very, very beneficial and rewarding conversation. And of course, they knew they were being set up to come in and do a program for you. So Chuck, it's yours.
I'm behind you. In so many ways. Yes, one step behind Terry my whole life. It's like being married. On that happy note. Good morning and welcome to the History of Change at Plymouth Church. I am Chuck Marsh and I'm our unglorified timekeeper this morning, although I do get to introduce our speaker. We are on a tight schedule because we have to finish by 11:30 because that's when the second service starts and I'm reading scripture there. So we'll ask that you hold questions and comments until the end of the presentation, and then if you do have them, if you could try to keep them really concise. I know we're Plymouth, but concise. Susan McCarthy, our speaker this morning, as you know, is our Plymouth historian and chairs our history committee. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy. Let's see if I can get all these degrees. A Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and a Bachelor of Fine Arts from KU and a Master's of Art History from Boston University. For several years, she stayed at home working and raising 3 children. She then taught art history at Washburn University as an adjunct for 12 years. She retired 2 years ago, but she continues to research and write, and I just learned this 2 days ago. Her book about Kansas visual arts will be published by the University Press of Kansas a year from this spring. Congratulations, that's very interesting. So, over to Susan McCarthy for the History of Change at Plymouth Church. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that introduction and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak before you today. This is a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. I love this church, as all of you do who are here today. So my purpose is to talk about the changes to the sanctuary and what the changes that have happened over the course of its 155-year history. And you'll see as I talk that there have been many, many changes. I'm only going to highlight the key changes. There are many things I can't talk about today, but I'm going to focus my attention on the main building, the sanctuary. We've got 3 buildings in our campus, and I won't talk about either the north or the south building because that will just be a distraction, but the history of those buildings is equally interesting. What I am not here today to do is to tell you how to vote next week. But I think you'll all agree that anytime you vote on anything, it's best that you be informed and you know what you're voting about. So thanks again to the PMC for inviting me here today. So I'm going to talk about the changes chronologically to the sanctuary at Plymouth. And when I talk about the sanctuary, I'm talking about the main audience hall or worship space. So you could call that the nave, plus the chancel, plus the choir, plus the organ, or we'll just call it the sanctuary. So as most of you know, Plymouth was built between 1868 and 1870. It was designed by the man you see on the screen, John Haskell. He was probably the best known 19th century Kansas architect. He designed most of the Kansas Capitol in Topeka, many churches, many university buildings on campus, some residences in Lawrence. He was very well known in his time and highly esteemed. The picture to the right of him is of Plymouth from about the time the building was finished in 1870. So let's see if this is going to work. Yes. Okay. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of interior photos from the early years. This is the earliest one I know of. So this is from 1897, And as you can see by the dates on the photo, it says 1857 to 1897. And most of you know that this church was founded in 1854. So why that date? The only thing I can come up with is that 1857 was the year that Richard Cordley joined Plymouth. That was the first year he came to Plymouth. If you don't know who I don't know if that went out. If you don't know who Richard Cordley is, this is a picture of Richard Cordley. He's sometimes referred to as the father of Plymouth Church. He served 2 terms here from 1857 to 1897. So he was the minister who was in place when this church was built. He left for a few years and then he returned in 1884 and served until his death. If you want to know more about Richard Cordley, there's a memorial to him outside the church, or else you could find Harold Ream. Where's Harold? Our resident Richard Cordley. He knows everything about Richard Cordley that you would ever care to know about. So. And he sometimes impersonates him. So he's our Richard Cordley in this time period. Okay. Okay, the next, oh no, that didn't advance, sorry. There, okay, so this photo is from 1899, and this shows the seating chart from that year. So you will recognize that we still have this same seating arrangement, 3 sections of pews with 2 aisles in between. What's unusual is that next to what I'm going to be calling the chancel, which is that area up at the top, are 2 sections of 5 aisles each, which run parallel to the chancel. So that's new. I don't know how long it lasted, but it certainly was the case in 1899. And if you come up and look at this photo closely, you can see that there are names written on the pews, which brings up the story of how we used to pay for our expenses at this church. We didn't follow this, what is now the standard pledging pattern. Instead, people at the each year would go to a church supper, and then afterwards they would bid on the pew where they wanted to sit and would pay accordingly. So basically, you would rent a pew, and if you sat in the middle of each section, you would pay top dollar. If you would sit toward the front or toward the rear, you would pay less. So that is how we paid our expenses for most of the period from 1870 up to 1900. And then about 1900, am I getting lots of echo? And in 1900, we went to the standard pledging format. But it's still a really interesting picture. Okay, so this next photo is from our 60th anniversary, and you can see now they have adjusted the year to our founding in 1854. A couple of things about this photograph that I'd like to draw your attention to. First of all, notice the size of the organ, very small. This is our original organ, and notice that the seating in the choir area is fairly small. I counted, I think, 15 people. Other than that, things in the sanctuary are about the same. Notice the chandeliers, these were gas at the time. And let's see if there's anything else. Oh, notice the decoration along the wall. We will see this change over time. So this is the second type of decoration that we find on the walls. The original decoration in Plymouth were frescoes that were on the wall and on the ceiling. And that's something that the ladies in Plymouth paid extra at the founding because they wanted to add beauty to the sanctuary. Unfortunately, so if you don't know what frescoes are, that's this old medium that started way back. The Minoans, the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans used frescoes, and then they were perfected in the Renaissance. So the medium itself is when you add pigment to wet plaster and apply it to a surface. And when it's done well, it's an extremely stable medium. So it just stays there forever. If it's not done well, then unfortunately it can fall off the surface, which is what happened at Plymouth. So you had parts of the ceiling falling down on parishioners. So that couldn't last. So then they had to repaint. What they replaced it with is a style called, wait a minute, this is the wrong one. Oh, well, anyway. So what they replaced it with is a style called East Lake, which started in England and was popular through the late 1800s and through the Victorian period. Okay. So you can't talk about our sanctuary without talking just a little bit about the stained glass windows. So the women of the church, again, I'm not dissing the men, they did plenty, but the women work to pay for the extras. And one of the things they really wanted were stained glass windows in the church. So they held church suppers, they washed the dishes themselves instead of hiring it done. They took coffee down to Mass Street. Lots of stories about what they did. Anyway, they finally had enough money. They bought windows from England, and they certainly didn't go travel to England to buy them. They did this all by letter, of course. So they bought them from England. Unfortunately, the windows did not arrive in time for our opening in May of 1870. So the windows had to be boarded over. But when they did arrive and they were shipped over from London to New York and then by boat and wagon train to Lawrence, only one window was broken. So that's truly amazing. But another amazing part of the story of our windows, and over the years they've had to be updated, re-leaded, cleaned, etc., just to keep them in good shape. But one story that I find just amazing is that after they'd been in place for maybe 50 years or so, members of the congregation got tired of them for some reason. Maybe it was all the colors, the crazy patterns, but they decided enough of these stained glass windows. We would prefer clear glass. And so they were serious enough about this that they asked a representative of Tiffany's in New York City to come to Lawrence, and he did, and said, "What are these worth? Could we sell them to you?" So he examined them closely, and he said, "Name your price." And then they realized what they had. So they said, "Okay, we'll keep them." So no more talk about clear glass. All right, so moving on. Okay, so you probably saw a picture of this in Eric's presentation. This is the second organ, called the Marvin organ, from 1922. Frank Marvin was an organist at Plymouth for 26 years, and he also, I think, worked at KU. So here you see a big change. So now the organ stretches almost from the north wall to the south wall. There's increased size in the choir area. Besides that, we don't find a lot of changes in the sanctuary. So the chancel is the same. You see we have radiators for gas heat, but basically the sanctuary is about the same. We have new stenciling along the wall. Notice the chandeliers, which were gas at that time. I'm sorry, I'm
Use
just...
this for the moment,
Okay,
and I will change your battery.
okay. As early as 1911 and into the 20s and 30s, there were attempts to aid people who were hard of hearing. So the first plan was to place a telephone on the lectern, and then people would call in, hopefully before the service began, and listen through their phones to the service. And then they put the phones in the pews. That was a second iteration. Finally in 1937, we had this thing, which was called an acousticon, which were hearing aids inside headphones. So this is just a reminder that things were always being done to try to help out the hard of hearing. And other things evolved over time. Okay, in the period of 1951 to 53, the early 50s, there were many, many improvements and renovations in Plymouth. So a 3-year plan was undertaken. The parish church was renovated. Mechanical things were done. There was new carpet in the sanctuary, new cushions also. But a devastating thing happened in 1955 where there was a fire in the parish house. And if you don't know what the parish house is, that's where the South Church is today. So this was terribly devastating, of course. No one was injured or killed, except I think a firefighter may have been slightly injured. So the entire 3rd floor was destroyed. Part of the 2nd floor and part of the 1st floor were destroyed. The main building basically escaped, although there was fire on the roof. So the damage to the sanctuary was mostly from smoke and water. The good thing was, and I think a lot of you have heard this story before, about how Carl Althaus, who was a very influential man in the congregation and did lots of things to help out the church, had increased the insurance on this building just months before the fire broke out. So fortunately, the insurance payout, which was about $100,000, completely paid for rebuilding the parish house. So that was a wonderful thing. Let's see, we need to catch up here. So this time was also just a very pivotal period in Plymouth history because the church was growing tremendously. There was an increase in membership. We had lots of kids in the church. And the question was, what do we do with all these new people? We wanted them to stay, of course. So we had this parish house that obviously was going to be rebuilt. We had the money from the insurance company, so that was a no-brainer. And the parish house was where we had Sunday school rooms, a kitchen, a few meeting rooms. So that helped with the congestion, but it really didn't solve all of our problems. So there was a time in the early 50s when the congregation actually thought for a while about moving. We owned some land in the suburbs, and the congregation thought about why not just give up our downtown spot and move to the suburbs where parking would be plentiful. We'd have a whole big parking lot. You'd never have to scrounge around for parking. We could build a building that's big enough to house all of us. And they did think about that for a while, but they decided, no, we're a downtown church, we're staying put, this is where we belong. So instead, as I said, they rebuilt the parish house, and they also decided to purchase north of the church where we're sitting now. There were 2 small houses. So they purchased those houses, and that for a while was where they held Sunday school rooms. And then eventually they built this building, which we call North Church. And North Church is where we have meetings, classrooms now, etc. But while the north and the south buildings helped with congestion of one sort, it did not help with congestion in the sanctuary. So our membership needed more space for people to worship in. And in the 50s, it was decided that the balcony, which previously had housed a big worship or a big lectern, lecture space, and the chapel, it was decided to completely redo the balcony and locate those two rooms elsewhere in the church, raise the ceiling and lower the floor and add pews. The result of this was that the rose window that you have always been able to see from the exterior, you could now see from the interior because those pews were lowered. So that was one benefit, but it also added 250 more seats. So the 250 plus the 750 on the main floor gave us about 1,000 seats. So that was enough for that time. Okay, we're up to the 60s. Air conditioning, yes. Can you believe that the church at some times, and this is not just our church, but other churches as well, would take chairs and go to South Park to meet during the summertime. It was so hot in this building. I can't even imagine how that logistically was done. But finally, they'd talked about air conditioning for a while. In 1967, 68, they finally bit the bullet and paid for it. They also put in a new PA system, and a new organ was also being contemplated. Excuse me. So in the new organ, which is the Reuter organ, was dedicated in October of 1970. This is the third organ of our history, and you will recognize, excuse me, you will recognize most everything in the sanctuary now, because that's the organ we currently have, which will be replaced in about a year, a little more. So that's the Reuter organ, 1970. Everything else has stayed the same in the sanctuary. But the next big change is coming just 5 years later, is the first change to the chancel. So the chancel lasted from 1870 to 1975 in its original configuration. Then in 1975, there was an expansion to the chancel. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a picture that was close to 1975. So this is a photograph from Easter of 2013, which I think shows the expansion pretty clearly. When I was looking for evidence of this, I couldn't find a whole lot about it until I looked into the records of the Board of Trustees in 1975. And then I, excuse me, and then I found a little bit more information about it. Ruth and Carl Althaus offered to pay for the new chancel, but they didn't just do it. They decided it was a big enough decision that they took it to a called congregational meeting, and the vote was 170 in favor, 1 vote against. So, and also the chancel expansion took 1 week. So this is also when Carl Althaus, who rebuilt the chancel, was digging through the rubble, and he found these original nails from 1870. So he took the nails and he made them into crosses. So he was just an all-around, he could do everything. He made them into crosses and handed them out to people. I don't know how many there were at one time, but there are some that are left. And I asked Jenny, the moderator, if she would take a picture of hers since she's the current moderator and has the cross now. So this is the moderator's necklace from those nails from 1870 that Carl Althaus made. Okay, so continuing with the chronological renovations, in the 90s we had some major renovations in the sanctuary. We needed to bring the sanctuary up to ADA requirements. So I don't know if most of you knew that the central door, which you see here, was the only door exiting on the east side. So we had 2 new doors put in at the end of each aisle, which just amazes me. They look like they've been there since 1870 as well. The wall sconces, those were originally gas, and they were taken down when we switched from gas to electricity. So those had been down all that period, and they were put back up in the 90s. One more thing, remember that seating chart I showed you? Well, these are the original walnut pews. They were just put back in the order of that diagram that I showed you from 1899. So when you go into the sanctuary, you know that those pews are back in the original order. So we get to the 2nd century campaign. That was focused mostly on building the South Church, renovating this church. So that was a huge campaign. But that basically brings us chronologically up to date. So now I want to just go back and consider the chancel. So these are the best pictures. I think the 1922 Marvin organ shows the chancel, and then this one I took just last week. So what was done in the 1975 expansion? I think you can see it yourself, but I'll just point out that this floor up here was expanded out to the widths of the base platform. So I think this base platform was in place from 1870 on, so it never changed. And what they did in 1975 was basically expand out to the limits of the platform. We still have the steps up in the front as we did back in the older period. We have this exit off the back side. What we gained was basically more room on the top, so we could have 2 chairs, a table, 2 lecterns, as opposed to a smaller stage with 1 bench and 1 lectern. So this enables us to have 2 ministers or more up on the top. Basically, that's the change. I don't know if you have any trouble seeing the comparison. I drew this silly drawing to try to, it's really dumb, but just to show, and that gives us the, the dimensions as well. So I'll put it back to this, and with that I conclude my presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Questions, comments? Would you introduce yourself if you have some? And we need to finish by 11:30, so concise. John Nalbandian, let's get you a microphone.
Thank you very much. This is really informative, interesting.
Thank you.
Present day, there's some controversy over what these changes there must have been a lot of controversy. Was it all sort of like, yeah, let's go ahead and do it, or was there a lot of pros and cons?
Are you talking about the changes to the...
Various change. I mean, there were some dramatic changes.
Oh, yes.
And did everybody said, oh yeah, let's do it, or?
I think it's... Okay. I think it's similar, very similar to today. You go through various The governing body, the council, considers things, and if it's significant enough, it goes to a called congregational meeting. So yeah, there's always going to be dissension and questions about the right moves. I don't think that has changed at all. And you saw that last chancel, everyone wanted it, but still they took it to a called congregational meeting. I think that says a lot.
I was just going to add that the acolytes have 2 of those crosses as well,
Oh,
and
is
they're
that-
hanging in the closet.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
They actually chose to wear them today.
Oh.
I usually give the kids an option as to whether they wear their crosses with their beads or the OG crosses, and today they chose the OG crosses.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, Bev Carruthers, because I interrupted her, could we go to her and then to David Bergeron, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Susan, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Being an old member, and my aunt had been organist here in 1927 to 30. 2 things.
Yeah.
Bill Duncan was the one that oversaw the enlargement with the blessing, and Bunny from Bill Duncan was at Zimmerman Steel, and he was the one that collected those nails, and he also, all of the square-headed nails, and they came in several different sizes, and then he welded them together. So that was Bill Duncan, and he oversaw the buildings of the church. And also, what happened was the council meeting at one point, this was prior to the fire, right before the fire, the council meeting decided they didn't have enough money to insure the church for all of, for 100%. So what they did was they decided on 50%. And that night, Carl Althouse was like the treasurer of the church. And he and Ray Nichols' brother, I'm sure we can find his name, went into his office, and the 2 of them decided they could not let that happen. And so the 2 men made up the difference to make it 100%.
Wow.
And the fire was a short time later. And also the windows were smoky. Mm-hmm. And so the women thought, well, instead of just cleaning them, let's maybe get new ones. They were thinking of new ones. And so when they brought the people in from New York, they were looking at buying new stained glass windows. And when he said, I will give you anything in my display booklet, you may have anything you want, for if I can have your windows. And they decided, we'll clean them.
Bev, thank you.
One question. First of all, the 90s and the renovation was not controversial at all.
No.
I mean, it did come up to a vote, which is the procedure. A question I don't know the answer to. When was the cross put in just above the choir, and was that controversial?
That was with the latest, the Reuters organ. I'm sure of that. Yeah. So 1970.
To Scott Morgan.
Hi, I just noticed that when the organ expanded, that it replaced 2 or covered up the 2 stained glass windows, which seemed like that would have been a big deal.
Yes.
What happened to those windows?
I think they were bricked in. The space was bricked in, and then we used the stained glass in other parts of the church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Harold.
Thank you, Susan. I excuse me, served on Susan's history committee for several years, and we were so fortunate. We have such a rich history in this church, and it's so good to have a dedicated historian that keeps us up to date. I just want to respond to a little bit of question John Nalbanian raised, because I'm so old that Carl Althouse was a good friend of mine. We were both graduates of the same undergraduate college. And so we went to occasional alumni meetings, and there was one meeting we went to in Kansas City in the 1980s sometime. On the way back, Carl regaled us with stories of meetings and discussion and controversy that led up to the change of the chancel in 1975. And yes, there was interest in expanding the chancel far more than was done.
Is that right?
So the vote you referred to that passed by one vote was apparently some kind of compromise between those who wanted to keep it as it was and expand it slightly. But Carl, you know, it's always difficult to quote someone when you're not referring to writing, but from a conversation.
Yeah.
But Don and I both remember, she was in the back seat and Carl and I were in the front. I remember Carl saying, there's very little more we can do to the chancel to retain the historical significance of the sanctuary.
Thank you.
I think Steve Broad had something.
Tim.
When were microphones first used in the sanctuary?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I know that we got a new PA system at some point in the 90s, but I don't know. Good question. In the 90s, yeah. Or 63. Okay, there you go.
I can speak to that just a little bit, that I remember, you know, in the 70s, and I don't know if they were put in with the 70s, you know, the 70 organ installation, there were two big ugly speakers, probably between the front, like window number 2 and window number 3 on the side walls, that were removed in the 90s when they cut the big hole in the ceiling to put the sound system in up there.
Wow.
My question had been actually the same as Scott's, so great mind. So I'm wondering where that window went and who was mad about that.
Yes.
To John Birch.
Two questions. When the chancel was expanded in 75, why was it expanded? I think you mentioned it was to accommodate 2 pulpits. Had we only had 1 minister until then? Second question, somewhat related. When did it start happening, if you happen to know the answer to this, that we would have musical performances during our church services? Bell choir, children's choir, etc. Some of those are, I think, relevant to the decision we're facing nowadays.
Yeah, good question, John. I don't know. I mean, we've had associate pastors for a long time. I don't know when it started that they were active participants in the service. And I think that the benches that you could see up on the chancel certainly was large enough for 2 people to sit there, but it was pretty tight. So I don't know when, other than just making it 3 people.
So, and, you know, Bev may have other insights on this, but, you know, one of my earliest memories of Plymouth was the discussion around expanding the chancel. I'm not sure Dad may even have been moderator around then. And there was some remarkably similar discussion at that point that I recall of Butch Henderson wanted more room up there because he wanted more flexibility for more programming. He wanted to be able to have both himself and you know, the associate pastor to be on the platform and both participating more fully in the service. And there was a certain amount of concern that this was turning you know, this was going to turn it into a stage, and that wasn't what it was supposed to be. So that's my recollection of that. I think it was largely Butch's instigation.
Could we go to David Ambler for the last question or comment, please? So make it good, Dave.
Yeah, it's not really a question, it's clarification. I asked Peter Lucky when we went to 2 pulpits, or pulpit and lectern, and he said it was before he came. It was either during Kendall Baker or Jonathan Knight that we went to the 2. No, to 2 pulpits.
No, it's not 2 pulpits, it's a lectern and a pulpit.
Well, Butch always told me the story that your father convinced him to stay with the 1 pulpit because preaching was so central to the congregational way.
Listen, thank you all so much for being here. Particular thanks to Susan McCarthy.